social medias and whatnot. Thanks for joining us. If you're new to book club, we've been doing this for a few years, and every uh, month we celebrate a great book that's out there, and a lot of times they're by friends of ours. Just so happens that this week I am real excited because this is a special book. We're going to talk about it. If you haven't read it, it's okay. But this is it right here. Kevin Burns and Kevin Riggs. Today, the best day of my life. So thanks for joining us or watching this afterwards. Uh, if you did read the book, you know that Kevin Burns is not able to join us tonight. He is incarcerated at Unit 2 of Riverbend. That's Tennessee's death row. We're going to hear all about it, but he is with us in spirit, isn't he, Kev?
Yeah, that's
He's
right. He knows that we're doing this, so
in,
he is
yes, he
with
is.
us in spirit.
But we do have my friend and my brother, Reverend Kevin Riggs, who is, I mean, for 3 decades, been the pastor of Franklin Community Church. He's also does a whole lot of great organizing in the state of Tennessee. Franklin is in East Tennessee, my home
Middle
state.
Tennessee, Middle
Middle
Tennessee.
Tennessee. Okay, no, I'm a little further east, so but we still like Franklin. And this is the book we're talking about tonight. And first of all, Kev, I thought it would be helpful just for you to say how you knew you wanted to write this book. And then we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about KB and your relationship and how we all met and all that. But how did you know this was something you wanted to do together?
Yeah, well, KB and I have been on a journey together for a little over 10 years now, and our church ordained him as a pastor back in 2018. And really, over the course of time, KB really just become my pastor. And I don't say that to be flippant. I mean, I really mean that. I mean, we have some deep conversations. Of course, he shares with me. Oftentimes I share with him some of my struggles. And so we'd always talked about writing a book together. And actually, what happened was several years ago now, Christian Community Development Association contacted me to write a sermon or a lesson guide and a sermon for their Locked in Solidarity Week about mass incarceration. And so I immediately pulled KB in as well. He started off just writing the prayer for that week, and then it got to where we were writing the whole thing together, and it was just so much fun writing together that it's like we need to do this book. We need to do this book. And then in 20 well last year, so 2023, two things happened kind of at the same time. My son was taken in a tragic car accident, and KB was denied relief from the Supreme Court. And so it was kind of those two things where it's like, you know what, KB, if we ever write a book, we need to do it now.
Mm,
And the book kind of took a shape on its own. It's like I didn't have an outline in the book and then follow the outline like you're supposed to do. It was just let's just start talking, sharing your story, KB's story, what got him into the place where he is now, and then he would talk, I would take notes, and then come back and write it up, and really, and this because you've written a book, and this is actually the fourth book that I've written. Um, I met with a guy in May, mid-May, who wanted to help us get it published. And he said, "When can you have it done?" And I was like, "Well, I work better with a deadline." And he said, "Okay, why don't you have me 60,000 words by the end of July?" And
mm.
so, and so I called Riverbend, the prison where KB is, and said, "Hey, can I come in more than just once a week? Because we're working on this book." And they gave me permission to come really any Monday through Friday to sit down. So I'd go 2 or 3 days a week, and the end of July we turned in a 65,000 word manuscript.
Mm.
So I think both of us really felt how quickly it came together. I mean, we really felt some type of divine anointing on it because it just fell in place. The stories fell in place. The organization of it fell in place. And so again, we turned it in the end of July 2023, but yet it was over a year later. It was in August of 2024 before it actually was printed, and that's somewhat normal, to try to
Yeah.
get it first manuscript to print form. But it's just been, it's really been more about KB than me. I mean, KB will tell you if he was here that this book for him was a chance to tell his story, because up until now the courts have told his story, and he's never been able to. He felt like nobody has ever listened to him,
Yeah.
and so what it's done for KB, what it's done for KB's family. We had a book launch in West Memphis, Arkansas, with his family that was just
Wow.
uh, an unbelievable, sacred, holy time with lots of members of his family, and to see how his mom and dad have reacted, and everything. It's given them hope that they haven't had in a long time. And so, it
So good.
took us a while to write it, but when we started writing it, it came together pretty quick.
Yeah, and look, y'all. Well, I've got both signatures because Kev wrote me a little note in there. But all the books have Kevin, KB's Kevin Burns' signature in there, which is powerful just to remember that there's a
But
person and that they can't
yeah,
be.
well, not all the books, Shane. They have to come.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, no, they have to come through me. So I guess if you want that information, if anybody wants
Oh,
to
wow.
purchase from me, then I can make sure that the names are in there. But yeah, but if you just order it off Amazon, those won't be in there.
Oh, and then there's a picture. I don't know if that's in all of them, but it says this
That's
is
in
the
all of them.
only picture of Kevin Burns and Kevin Riggs. And this was taken
Yeah,
during the ordination service. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But
yeah.
yeah, and you want to say a little bit more about why that's the only picture or how you got access to it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was at the ordination, and to their credit, the prison really bent over backwards to allow us to have an ordination service there, and KB could invite, I think it was 30 people, any 30 people he wanted to invite, he could invite to that. And then we had a good representation from my church. You were there, and there was probably 40 to 50 people there, and they took some pictures. We couldn't take pictures, but they had somebody there to take pictures, and they wanted to send us more, but the warden intervened and said, no, you can only send them one, just one
Yeah,
picture, and that's the one they sent, and so that's the only picture of KB and I together, and it's 6 years old now, so
yeah.
so
S- So powerful. So we're going to get to that ordination because that was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had, to be honest with you. And I mean, really deeply um, uh, a holy time. Uh, but first, let's tell the story when we first met. At least when I'm going to start, if that's all right. I
okay.
like because it's a little bit of this story is in the book, but I first started going to Unit 2, which is the same as Death Row. You say that in the book, but we kind of have the shorthand to Unit 2, that part of the prison where folks that are sentenced to die live, and the execution chamber is also in the same compound. Uh, but I first started going there. It's been over 10 years, and I think it was around the same time that you started going. Um, but the first time that I can remember meeting KB, I think it was the first time I ever met him, was a really profound experience. I mean, I get chill bumps on my arm because I had come down to Nashville because I was doing some stuff at a conference. But the thing about it was the governor at the time, Bill Haslam, was also speaking at that conference, and we knew it was a Christian conference. We knew that he was talking about his faith, and I had kind of really pushed my friend that had organized it all to ask him about the death penalty because they did this interview piece. But then I got to meet him afterwards, and so I was kind of, you know, thinking about what I would say and praying about it. And um, it was a pretty brief encounter, but I said to him, I'm praying for you and I'm praying that you will do what Jesus would have you do. And Mother Teresa had said that to a governor one time. So I picked up on her cue. And then we talked a little bit about the power, the daunting power of deciding whether or not someone lives and dies, especially as a Christian, trying to reconcile that with your faith. And so we talked a little bit, and then I went to Unit 2. And so I walk into the room, and we'll talk a little bit about the context because it's a very unique experience. A lot of maximum security prisons, and especially a lot of death rows, you can't even have contact visits. You can't touch the other person, but it's a pretty unique situation. And so I walk into this room with I think about a dozen guys, and they're not chained up. We're able to sit around and talk and pray, hug each other. So I walk into this room though, and having just talked to the governor, I thought, what would these guys say? So I asked, I said, I just had some time to talk to the governor, and I wonder what you would say if you all had a chance to talk to Governor Haslam. And, it was quiet for just a minute. And then I think it was the first, response was KB, and he just said, unflinchingly, he said, we'd invite the governor to come pray with us. And, said a little bit more, hear what Jesus has done in their life. And it was so profound. It was a powerful moment. And it actually had all kinds of things that I would say the Holy Spirit kind of did through that. We've got these little postcards now that have, it's a really simple one-liner, and it says, we understand you're a man of faith, and we would like to ask you to please come pray with us. It's an invitation to pray from over half the guys on death row. And this was to Governor Lee originally, to Governor Haslam originally, and now to Governor Lee. But, that there were other things going on I later found out, and you talk about it in the book, but I think to me, that was one of my first encounters with KB, and it captures the beautiful centrality of his faith, right? And why to him, and just the courage, it was so spirit led, it felt like. But you want to fill in the blanks a little bit? Could you kind of talk about the story, and there's a little
Yeah.
bit more going on, and then you got to know him through that?
Yeah, well, I don't remember the exact order now, but in counting you, in a very short period of time, it was two or three different people who came, all ministers who came to death row, and in one form or another, kind of asked that similar question, and some of them just point blank told KB he needed to write a letter to the governor, and so to have that happen more than once in a short period of time was really, I think, a God thing. KB finally got the message, and he did write a letter to the governor to ask him to come pray with them, and then of course it got narrowed down to these men. Now, unfortunately, some of those men who signed that letter have been executed since the letter was first written. And there was one time where I was really, really close, where I thought Governor Lee was going to come and meet with those guys. I was working with a pastor of his, and the pastor was asking me all kinds of questions about what that would look like and how would that take place. He wanted to know if the men would be in handcuffs and all that kind of stuff. And I told the pastor, I said, well, no, they're not going to be in handcuffs. And then KB told me, when I told KB, he's like, no, you should have told him we'll wear we'll wear
Full
stuff around our
shackles.
ankles, around our hands. We'll do whatever he wants us to do, just to come and meet with us. So I think we were close at one time, but to date, the governor has really never responded to those letters. I've given him multiple letters, hand delivered them to him. On one occasion, had prayer with the governor after I gave him a letter from that. So he has received
Yeah.
hundreds, if not thousands, of those postcards over the years. And there's precedents in Tennessee. Governor Clement went and prayed with the guys. I don't remember now. It may have been in the 60s. I can't remember. And after meeting with them, he gave everybody on death row clemency.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
yeah, it's so powerful. And then, that, you talk about this in the book, how important proximity is. It changes
yeah,
everything. And the death row is the exact, capital punishment is the exact opposite of personal, proximity and personalism. There's so many layers of bureaucracy that people hide behind
yeah.
to feel like they're not actually taking
Well,
the
let
human
me tell you
life.
this story. So this is just a month ago. A month ago, Dr. Elaine Pagels, you know that name?
Yes.
Pagels? She came to Unit 2, and I took her in. Joe Engel, a friend of ours, set it all up, but I took them in. And so Dr. Pagels and her husband were there, and there was probably about 15 of the guys sitting around a corner, and they were talking about um, one of the Gnostic Gospels. And 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 then these guys started asking her questions,
Mm.
and the questions were just unbelievable. And she teaches at one of the Ivy League schools. I can't remember which one. But when after that, we went out to lunch, and she commented that her students don't ask questions like that. And she was, in fact, when Joe and I were talking today. Her husband is writing something up about his experience of going uh, to visit Unit 2 here. And so anybody who goes to Unit 2, they don't leave the same. When you go in one way and you come out totally different. And because the guys there, a lot of their guys, their faith and their knowledge of Scripture and all of that is just really incredible.
And I think it's worth telling that story now. So, I mean, you fast forward, you've got years and years of a relationship. I mean, it would be helpful to hear how KB felt the call to ministry because he originally was taking you as a pastor. And by the way, y'all, the obvious thing is that we have two pastors named Kevin. And so all through the book, it's KB and KR,
BK,
Kevin Riggs. Yeah,
yeah.
you BK, Big Kevin. But talk a little bit about how you felt this call to, begin going to Unit 2, but then the more you were there, you recognize this real anointing and call on KB's life.
Yeah, well, KB will tell you, even as a young child, he felt at one point the call to ministry. His dad's a pastor, and he has a couple brothers who are pastors, but life got in the way of all those things. And so when um, after the event happened that got him in trouble, he rededicated his life to God, made some strong commitments while he was being held in Chicago, really, before he got sent back to Memphis. And even in Chicago, the Cook County Jail, while he was there, he was leading Bible studies, even though he wasn't there, but maybe a week or so. I mean, not long at all. And so when he ended up, and then we went to Shelby County Jail, awaiting for his hearing there for 3 years, he did the same thing. He was just leading Bible studies, and then when he got to Unit 2, one of the chaplains, Jenny Alexander, made him the chaplain's assistant for Unit 2. So he started being and really acting like a pastor. He would go around cell to cell talking to the guys, and all of that. And he had high respect from the administration on down to it. And so first time I met him, I was introduced as a senior pastor, and he came up and gave me a hug and said, "I've been praying for you."
Mm,
And I didn't know what to expect. That's the last thing I expected to happen there, and it got a little emotional. And so he and I developed this friendship, and really I just kind of stepped in with him. And so I would go and we'd make our rounds, just kind of go. I grew up conservative, so I know all about door-to-door evangelism. So we would just go cell to cell and talk to the guys who were behind the cells, and then the guys who were not, we would gather them around and talk to them. And it was obvious that for many of them, the only reason they talked to me is because I was with KB. They didn't really, a lot of them don't like visitors, they don't like pastors for various reasons. But if you're friends with KB, then you're my friend. And so he was really, I mean, KB kept telling me I was the pastor of Death Row, but he was really the one performing the pastoral functions. And so one day after we made our rounds and he and I were just sitting, we had another kind of deep conversation. It got a little emotional, and he was telling me how much the guys love me and appreciate me, and I'm the pastor of Death Row. And I was like, "No, I'm not the pastor. You're the pastor. This is your church." And I told him, if the only reason they talk to me is because I'm with you.
mm.
You've been doing this. You're the pastor. And he got a little emotional at that. And then on my way home, as I was driving home and reflecting on that, I just felt, in my tradition, I would say the Spirit of God spoke to me and said, "If you really believe he's a pastor, then you need to ordain him."
Mm.
And so convinced that I heard from God, I talked to the elders of my church. They agreed. The first thing KB had to do was join our church. And so he joined the church, and then we licensed him. He followed the same procedure I followed, where we licensed him first. He had lots of questions to answer to be licensed. And then during the year that he was licensed, he had to keep a recording, a written journal of all the ministries that he did, who he spoke with, when he got to preach, everything.
Mm.
And then after that, during that year also, he had tons more questions to answer. And they were, theological questions, personal questions, philosophical questions, social justice questions. I mean, it was a host of questions. And he would answer those questions. I would read them. I'd let the elders read them. We'd make comments, and I'd go back and we'd talk about it, and just kind of went back and forth that way to make sure that all of us were on the same page within our particular faith tradition. And then
Yeah.
in the end of that year in January, I don't remember the exact date, but it was January 2018, was when we had the ordination service,
Mm.
and that was really a holy moment. And
Mm.
then not long after the ordination service, maybe just a couple months, I told KB, I said, I've been thinking about we need to start a church on Unit 2 because Unit 2 has all kinds of religious activities, and on Sundays different groups come in and do communion, and they'll have small group kind of settings. I said, but what I'm thinking about is a church that does a church service, not another small group Bible study thing. But you need to follow a liturgy, of which my church doesn't even do that. I mean, we're pretty casual, but I was like, you got to do this. There's got to be hymns and fellowship and prayer and communion and a sermon, every week during this. And we talked, and what I found out later was that he had been having the same thought that we needed a church on Unit 2. And so we started a church. We named it Church of Life. So
Mm.
it's the Church of Life on death row. And the tagline is a church for the men on death row, led by the men on death row. And so I have volunteers from my church who go on Thursdays, but they're told, look, you're not in charge. KB's in charge. You're there just to support, but you're there to just worship with them and let KB lead the service. And that's been going on since 2018 as well. And what was
Yeah.
really interesting to me was during COVID, everything shut down inside the prisons as far as outside programs. So there were no religious people going in. There was no Alcoholics Anonymous, no visitors of any kind for 18 months. But Unit 2 had a church service every week because they had their own pastor there. And so they were able to keep it going and do something that, as far as I know, wasn't going on anywhere else in Tennessee. I don't know about the rest of the country, but I don't think in Tennessee there was in any of the prisons there was anything like that going on during COVID. Just in Unit 2.
Yeah. If y'all are just tuning in, we're talking with Pastor Kevin Riggs, and he co-authored this book, Today, the Best Day of My Life, with Kevin Burns, who is incarcerated and living on Tennessee's death row. I mean, that ordination service was one of the most powerful things. I mean, part of it was just to set the scene. You do this so well in the book, but I mean, we're in chairs, but we're surrounded by guards because there's about, you said about, a couple few dozen people there, 30 people or whatever that have been invited, and all the folks that work for the facility, the corrections officers are there. KB tells his story. It was a powerful time of prayer. But then what I mean, I'll never forget any of it, but the thing that um, really hit me was the power of communion. The first thing he did, as an ordained minister, was service all communion. And to be served communion by someone condemned to die, I mean, it sings of the mercy and the grace at the heart of the gospel. And, and all these guards are watching that happen. So, you want to say anything more about it? I mean, it's almost like you don't want to say too much because it was such a holy moment. It's hard to put words to the holiest times, but man, it was something.
Well, in the book, there's a picture of his. He made an invitation that he sent out, and and so it's in the book now. It's just black and white. It's not
Yeah.
color like the original. But KB designed the invitation to look like his cell door,
Mm.
and so the front of the card was his prison cell door with his number there. And then you open that up, and then it gave, when it was going to happen, and it was just a beautiful invitation. And like you, the communion was really just the most really holy, sacred thing that you could experience. Yeah, from that. So that top picture, if you lower it a little bit, lower the book a little bit so everybody can see it. That's his cell door at the top
Mm.
there, and that was the front of the card. It was just a beautiful invitation, and so the whole service was just unbelievable to me. And then really what happened after the service, and I think this is in the book, but after the service, the following week when I went to visit him, as we were walking around again, two or three guards, we would pass the guards, and they would say, "Good morning, Pastor Kevin." And now these guards had never spoken to me, so I'm saying good morning back. And finally, after about the third or fourth guard said that, it dawned on me that they still weren't talking to me. They were talking to KB, and the guards were calling KB Pastor Kevin.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
that was unreal.
part of what's so important as you read the book and as you hear this story is um, that the system is meant to dehumanize people and to actually sanctify
Mhm.
the liturgy of death, as you name it, so so powerfully, this horrific ritual of state killing that has its own uh, order of service,
Mhm.
last meal and final words and all, all the stuff that we do. And yet, like, these guards are watching this, and so this is why the death penalty is so wicked. Is it does damage to so many people that are extended, with this kind of moral injury because they participated in killing someone. And for a lot of these guards, I mean, not all of them, some of them might be new, but some of them I've seen these guys on death row for decades, and they've
Mhm.
seen, you know, for some of them who they were when they came in and who they are now, but they've also like seen KB get ordained. And I mean, the thought um, that his life is still um, in flux. I mean, the possibility of his execution. I mean, it just it's so sickening, right? So, yeah, and so I wanted to ask you, I mean, one of the questions you asked him when you went into the ordination was you said, we're going to ordain you no matter what. Like, this is not
Yeah.
like a gotcha test. But I just need to know, what happened? Did you take someone's life? And you said, we believe in redemption. So, like, Saul of Tarsus, David, Moses, they killed somebody. Like, you're more than the worst. We're all more than the worst thing we've ever done. But you asked them to tell you. And that's when think you really began to realize that this is one more story of an innocent person on death row that's been condemned to die. And the first third of the book really unpacks that, but maybe give folks just a little snapshot of that, because we're against all executions, but this story of KB is a story of innocence and something that that happened on his 23rd birthday.
Yeah. You want to know the event that happened itself, or just?
Well, I think, you say that you changed some of the names and whatnot,
Yeah.
but this is like, was it 1992 on his
Yeah.
23rd birthday?
Yeah.
He's caught up in this incident that with people he didn't even know, but
Yeah.
happened to be present in a car with the guys that ended up shooting several people and taking two
Yeah.
people's life, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the the thing that I have a hard time wrapping my head around is this whole series of events that led to KB being on death row was over an argument in a
Mm,
pickup basketball game.
yeah.
And so, and KB did not know any of the people at that basketball game. And so there was a basketball game after school one day, and there was an argument, and two guys got in a fight. And then fast forward a couple of days later, it's KB's birthday. He was in a rap group, and they had just signed a record deal. And so he thought that for his birthday they were going to take him to a music studio to record some more music, and he was looking forward to that. So much looking forward to that his girlfriend asked him to go out with her on his birthday, and he said, "No, I want to go record some music first. When I get done, I'll call you." Now think
Mm,
about what would have happened if he just stayed with his girlfriend. But so he went. So two of his friends came to pick him up, and in West Memphis, they drove over to Memphis, which if you're not familiar, is just over the Mississippi River. You have Memphis, Tennessee, West Memphis, Arkansas, but they're really just one city separated by a bridge. And so they go into Memphis, and one of his friends says, "Hey, we need to stop and pick up this guy. I think he may have been a dancer in the group, and but KB didn't know him, and they picked him up, and his cousin, his a teenage cousin, maybe 17 years old, was the one who was in that fight.
mm,
And so there ended up being six people in two different cars. Of the six people, KB knew two of them.
mm,
And so they said, "Hey, before we go record some music, let's go." And they went to the cousin's house, and then they saw, or somebody told them, that the car down the street was watching them, and it was the in that car was the guy who was the other guy in the fight that with the cousin. And so one of the guys um, suggested that they go confront these guys in a car. And KB is like, I just wanted to go record music. This is not my fight. I don't know anything that's going on. And one of the guys got out and had a bag of guns and gave everybody a gun, including KB. And you're like, what is this for? And he's like, well, just to make sure that nothing goes wrong. And so two guys walked toward the car, which is about 20, 25 feet away from where KB was. And there was an altercation, yelling in and outside the car. Shots were fired. Two people were killed. One person was shot. Another person was shot but not killed. Two people were killed, and then they all take off running. And so KB didn't kill anybody. He wasn't involved in the fight, and he was too far away to see who actually shot who. And
Yeah.
and so then KB eventually, I mean, the book goes into more detail, but eventually he had a friend whose husband was a truck driver, and he got in the truck and went to Chicago. And because KB had some small altercations with the Memphis police and other police in the past, and he was really afraid that the police caught him, they would just shoot him. And so he fled to Chicago, and and in Chicago a couple months later, well, it happened in April, then in July of '92, the FBI picked him up in Chicago, and he went, peacefully and willingly at that time, and thought that he would not, nothing would happen. Now his dad tried to get him to turn himself in, and basically was saying, if you turn yourself in, everything will be all right because you didn't kill anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And but anyway, so he was arrested in Chicago, brought back down here, and eventually he was charged with felony murder. And what felony murder says is that if you're around a situation when a crime is committed and somebody is killed, then you can be charged with murder even though you didn't kill anyone.
Yeah.
But the argument has always been, okay, that's not a good law, but okay, that's the law. But somebody who didn't kill anybody, I mean, goodness gracious, even if you're for the death penalty, you should be against that. I mean, it's like this is not what happened, and he knew no one. And then when he was at the trial, a gun was never produced. It was never said that he killed anyone. The other two guys who actually did the killing already had their trials. KB's was the last trial. And the other two guys who actually did the killing were given life with the possibility of parole. KB was the only, first of all, there were 6 people there. Now, out of 6 people who were there, only 3 people were charged with any crime. And so if you're going to be consistent, all 6 of them should have been charged with something, but only 3 of them were charged with anything. And of the 3, KB was the only one given life. And so in the last 2 years, his charge mates, the other 2 guys, have been released from prison. And so the 2 guys who actually did the shooting are now free, back with their families. KB is still on death row, awaiting execution. He's out of appeals. The only thing that can really stop it now is the governor granting clemency.
Yeah, and for folks that might be new thinking about the death penalty, this might seem really absurd, but the sad thing is that there's so many different variations of this story.
Mm.
And even in different states, there are different variations of that law. Some places it's called law of parties, which means you're guilty by association. That
Yeah.
literally there are cases where someone was driving a car, someone in that car went into a store and killed someone, and the person driving the car, sometimes who was pushed or bullied into it or had mental health mental like intellectual disabilities, like, or whatever, like, or they're younger, they can be found and sentenced to die, and the other person that actually killed the person doesn't face the death penalty. And so I mean and even in Tennessee, there's a lot of cases like in Dume, who I've done events with. I think he was actually convicted and sentenced to death, and he had never even been to the state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
Uh, the first time he came to the state of Tennessee was to defend himself in court. And so right now, like the statistic is there's over 200 exonerees for every 8 executions that have happened in the United States. there's been one exoneration from death row, and that's just someone that has been able to prove um, their innocence. And if you plea bargained, I think like that may have been the case in Dume. Some people, they will plead guilty to another crime that they didn't do so that they don't face the death penalty for a crime they didn't do. But then they're not even, in that category because they're still convicted of a crime. And so it's just such a mess, y'all. And that's why there's a lot of people that are going, even if I believed in the death penalty, like I don't trust our system enough. And as you read KB's story in particular, you see that, um, as Brian Stevenson says, he says that the system treats you better if you are rich and guilty than if you are poor and innocent. And this is one of the statements that KB made, right, Kev, is that there are no rich people on death row. As the old
Yeah.
saying is, the one without the capital gets the punishment. And that was surely the case for KB. You kind of,
That was the case for KB. He had, and I did, what I have learned personally is I've always talked about, you're in a lot of trouble if you don't have any money and you get a public defender. But what one of KB's lawyers pointed out to me, he said, no, 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 public defenders are usually pretty good. The ones you have to worry about are the lawyers who are assigned this case by a judge. And that's what happened here. It wasn't a public defender, it was a lawyer who was assigned by the judge to take this case and who may or may not even wanted the case, and then just did a horrible job in the defense, did not bring up um, a lot of things that should have been brought up. I mean, his present lawyer has told me and has said to the press that any competent lawyer could at the very least plea bargain KB down to some type of low charge or really not anything at all. They could have got him off, but it's just horrible defense at the time. And KB and his family not really knowing what to do or how to handle that, and then everything just steamrolled from there. And with nothing, I mean, I think even though he thought it was a possibility, he was shocked when the verdict came down, and he got the death penalty. But and this story is in there, KB has visions, and I know different people feel differently about that. I just trust him, but he had a vision not long after that where Jesus came to him really in a waterfall. It's a waterfall vision in there. And since that time, KB feels like that God told him, I have a job for you to do there. Don't worry about what these people say. I'm the one sending you there because you have a job for me to do.
mm,
When you've completed that job, I will get you out.
mm,
And he has held on to that. So it's almost like, I tell people, that's, I don't know, you hear people talk about incarnational ministry, and that's how KB feels, that God sent him to death row to be a minister to the people on death row and to do a job. And when it's over with, when God has finished his work in KB and in that place, God will deliver him. And he holds on to that, and I do my best to hold on to it with him,
yeah.
that, I believe that with you. And so he thinks, he doesn't entertain the thought that he's going to be executed. He thinks, to be honest, he thinks that eventually the governor will have a dream about him, and the governor, a man of faith, will take that dream, being God saying, "You need to give this guy clemency and let him go."
Well, may it be so.
May it be
Hallelujah.
so,
Come,
right?
come,
We
Lord.
believe
Yeah.
believe with him
Show
in
up
that.
tonight, even
That's right.
Lord. Yeah.
Right.
Uh, well, I think, this is interesting because next thing I was going to ask you was like, my experience with KB and with a lot of guys that I've gotten to know on death row is that they kind of defy categories and theological boxes. And I'm not a big fan of all that anyway, but
Yeah.
I think that, even the idea that he's sees visions and has these like actual dreams or hears God speak to him. I mean, that might be different for other folks that haven't had that experience, but I think there's also just a real integration of so many beautiful things that the church is good at separating. Even theologically, that this is just about going to heaven when you die or
Yeah.
whatever. And there's a lot of really bad religion on Christian ministries in prison. We won't name names, but
Yeah.
I thought, the book's filled with powerful prayers from KB, and we'll close with one in a minute. But I don't know if you wanted to say more about kind of his faith, and I mean it's so authentic, and it also kind of transcends
Yeah.
these Calvinist, Pentecostal, whatever.
Yeah, no, it really does. And I tell KB and anybody else who listens and that KB has far greater faith than I do. I mean, his faith is more more real and more powerful than even mine. And really it makes me think, I know you knew Mother Teresa and I'm a fan of hers, but she says something to the effect, you never know Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you got.
Hmm.
I think a lot of times the people in prison, they don't have anything else. All they have is Jesus and their Bible. They don't have tools. They don't have that. That's all they have is Jesus. And so, if all you have is Jesus and Jesus wants to speak to you and he's going to do it through a dream or a vision, well then, hey, let it be that way. And so I mean his faith, he preaches at our church sometimes through recordings. Every once in a while, he'll call in on a Sunday morning and preach, and he'll have I jokingly tell people my church loves it when he calls in to preach live, and so we'll put his picture on the screen and he just preaches over the telephone, and we have it on the speakers for everybody to hear it. My church loves it because they know he's only going to go 30 minutes because in 30 minutes there's going to be a voice comes up at 29 minutes and say you've only got 1 minute left. You
More
know,
more preachers need that voice,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah.
I need that to happen every Sunday. That voice that comes up and says, "You have 1 minute." But and so I mean, he really is a part of our church. Through that because he has during COVID he preached quite a bit because we were virtual for quite a long time, and again, just how he has impacted other people.
Yeah.
There's been I hope if TDOC sees this, they don't get mad, but there's been a couple people at the prison who work at the prison who I think they've seen me on TV talking about this. They may have read the book, but I think I've done some interviews and some long interviews even, who have come up to him privately and said, you're innocent, aren't you? We need to get you out of here. And so people are starting to hear this story, and so I think there is a high degree of hope that the governor is going to intervene. His lawyers right now are working on clemency at the request of somebody in the government, which is highly unusual. Another sick thing about the system, Shane, is usually you don't start clemency until you have a death date.
Yeah.
That's you. So if there's no death date, your case is just at a standstill, and you don't start the clemency process till you get one. Well, he doesn't have a death date yet, but his lawyers have been told you need to start work on the clemency and get it to the governor as soon as possible.
Yeah.
And so that's
That's
kind of where it
wow.
is right now. They're working on the clemency papers. That's where we're asking people to write letters to the governor. Um, and so there's a high degree of hope that this is going to have um, a good outcome for K. Because if he would get clemency and just get his sentence, now we want exoneration, complete exoneration. But if they would just take the death penalty off and give him life in prison like they did the other two, then he would be eligible for parole immediately
Yeah.
and could walk out. And then while he's on parole, could fight for his exoneration. And
Yeah.
so, I'm hopeful that that's what's going to happen. And I don't know. I just believe like KB believes. He heard from God, and God, when God's done, he'll get me out. And so, he doesn't stress about it. Um,
We'll put some of the websites in the chat, but tell folks the Save KB website. Which one's that?
it's savepastorkb.com. And if
Okay,
you go
cool.
there, there's information on how to write a letter, and it's to the governor. And right now, that's Governor Lee.
Yeah.
And but all the lawyers are actually going to his legal team, and they're going to collect all those letters. And when they turn in the clemency paperwork, all those letters will be part of the clemency. And it's real simple to do that. And you can mail it in or you can email it into. I think a lady in my church's email may be on that page that you can email it to her, and then she would forward it on to the contact at the legal department. But
Yeah, and sometimes, when these things happen, I mean, we've been holding virtual vigils and in-person protests and vigils around every execution, joining state coalitions like Tennesseans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty and other groups doing all that we can. But sometimes it's hard to know what you can do. And here's a really
Real
concrete way,
simple.
y'all. Really concrete. Take 10 minutes. I've got it on my to-do list this week, Kev, to write a letter to the governor and but you can go to that website, save Pastor KB and .com, right? .com.
Right.
So we'll
And
put it in the
yeah,
show
I mean,
notes.
there's on that website too. I think there's a link to some of his sermons that he's preached at our church. And there's other information on there, and
Yeah.
there's
And
a
we've
Facebook page as
broadcast
well.
some of them. We did the
Yeah.
Easter sermon at Red Letter Christians. Some of you may have seen the Stations of the Cross that are painted
Mm.
by the guys on death row. That was quite a project to get out of the prison, but we're able to make that available for free online. So I know we're in Advent, Christmas right now, but as Easter rolls around, there's a series of the Stations of the Cross painted by the guys on Tennessee's death row with KB, and the story of that's on our website. I want to make sure we don't run out of time. And by the way, if you're watching, y'all, you can put questions or comments in the chat. The hour's flying by, but we're watching all the different platforms too. My buddy Brandon's back there rocking it. So we'll try to bring a question or two up. But um, obviously, man, when your son died in that car accident, we were all, trying to figure out how to support you and Misty. And you tell the story. You don't have to go into all of it, but of the decision to go visit Unit 2 and see KB like a week or two later. I mean, just days later, but it wasn't like work. It's like you're going to see someone who is a spiritual um, lifeline for you. And Misty tells the story of feeling like she was in the arms of Jesus as KB hugged her. So, I mean, that's why y'all should read the book. But I just wanted to give you an
Yeah.
opportunity to share about what that, meant for you.
Yeah. Well, it was really just, I mean, I think the order is, I could be wrong on this, but KB was denied relief. And so there was no um, other appeals. It was going to be the end. The governor's the next step. And so when I got word that he had been denied relief, I called his mom and dad. His mom and dad aren't married to each other. So I called his mom first and told her the news because neither one of the lawyer wanted me to tell them. So neither one of them had heard yet. So I called the mom and of course, tried to comfort her, and then I called the dad and did the same thing. And I read them a prayer that KB had written from sometime in the past. I thought, I want to read this to you, so to try to encourage them. And then a week later, the accident with my son happens, and his dad calls me to comfort me, and then later on his mom calls me, and so it's like this co griefing, kind of thing. And it could have been, but anyway, so both those events happened at the same time, and so then, um, I tell people in a short period of time, I wrote a letter to the governor about being denied relief. I wrote a press release, and then I had to write my son's eulogy, and so all within a matter of just a few weeks or a few days, really had to do all this kind of stuff. And so, short time later, there was a group of friends coming in from CCDA, Christian Community Development, and we had set up a time to take them out to visit with KB, and so I wanted to do that, and my wife was able to go with me there, and that moment, you got to read the book, but that moment was just really unreal. How KB embraced her, and really how the unit manager just stood around because I was like, okay, we're violating all kinds of personal contact regulations here with the interaction between KB and my wife mainly, and then all the other inmates and or the guys in my. I mean, to this day, every time I go to Unit 2, somebody asks me how are you doing? How's your wife doing? I mean, they constantly are concerned about us. But what happened between KB and my wife was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Even to the point that as we were leaving, and I'm thinking, man, we're going to get in trouble because of this, because of the emotions that had been shown. The unit manager came up to me and he was crying and he was like, "This is beautiful, and you guys can come anytime you want, anytime you want to." I mean, so he was touched from that, and the people who were there with me from Christian Community Development will tell you to a T that was life transformational for them to see how not, mainly KB, but how all of the guys showed love to my wife and I during during that time, and it was part of the healing process, and we still have healing to do. It's the holidays, which are never easy now, but that was you know in your life following Christ, you kind of have these high marks where you just never forget, and that is up there with the ordination and everything else. Just to see, in fact, I wrote another letter to the governor after that to try to express to him what I had witnessed that day. And I said in that letter, and I didn't include this letter in the book, so this is a little bit more personal, but I told I told the governor, I said, because of what happened that day, if it were possible, I would change places with KB.
Mm, 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 mm. Well, my brother, thank you for your pastoral heart, your friendship to so many of us, but especially your friendship with KB. And this book's a gift to all of us. And I thought I would, I mean, I'll give you a chance if you want to say anything else, but I
Let me
thought I
say
would
something before you
close
read.
with, I'm going to close
Hey, Shane, let me
with a
say something
prayer.
real quick
Yeah.
before
And
you
then
read.
yeah,
In
totally.
case people forget the title of the book, I need to tell them if you go
Oh,
search,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. You should tell where it comes from. Go ahead,
well,
man.
I mean, you can get it on Amazon, but you're going to have to write or type in "today, the best day of my life." If you say "today is the best day of my life," you're going to get sent somewhere else. So don't put that word "is" in there. It's
Yeah.
today, the best day of my
Best
life.
day of my life.
In any of the book platforms, and it'll come up from there.
Yeah, and it is a powerful story because it's like classic, iconic KB. I mean, when you
Yeah,
ask him how you doing, he's like, best day of my life.
yeah,
But it also like the backstory. I don't even think I knew it until I read the book, and it was a mentor or pastor to him that
yeah.
was preaching. And you want to just finish out where the title
Yeah, it
came
was a
from?
child. It was one of his childhood pastors, and that was his saying, "Today's the best day of my life." And while he was incarcerated, he got word from his sister, who was still going to that church, that this pastor had a heart attack and died in the pulpit. And as he was laying there in the pulpit, the sister said his very last words were, "Today is the best day of my life."
Mm,
And so at that moment, KB said, "That's going to be my statement. I'm going to pick that up. That today is the best day of my life."
mm. Ooh, right. Hallelujah. Well, this is it. Great hour, y'all. Great conversation with my brother, Kevin Riggs, Pastor Kevin Riggs, co-author with Pastor Kevin Burns, KB. Today, the best day of my life. So I want to close with this prayer. We've got several of KB's prayers on the Red Letter Christians website and several sermons that he's given. You can check those out, and hopefully we'll have another one soon. But this is a prayer that he wrote, and it's very powerful. So I thought, Kev, I will read this, and then I mean, we don't always close book club with a prayer, but y'all, this is a holy, holy book and a holy time. So this is Kevin's prayer, KB's prayer. O Lord God Almighty, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, wonderful Savior. Lord, you are holy, and I lift you up and magnify your name. I love you, my God, because you first loved me. Yes, you loved me wonderfully. and reverently created me in your own image. Then you gave me power to be called a son of God. O Lord God, I will praise your name forevermore. For your faithfulness is everlasting, and to your mercy there is no end. And now, my Lord, I thank you that your ears are open to the cries of the prisoners. For upon you have we laid our hope, neither will we look to any other. For there is none other who is able to deliver like you can. Deliver us, therefore, O Lord our God, I pray. Deliver us swiftly. Deliver us from bondage and shame. Deliver us from sickness and disease. Deliver us from the expectations of those that seek our harm. And we will praise your holy name. Bring us out healthy and strong, and please don't leave us alone. Give us those of your people that will help us and restore us to our place in society. And Lord, we will live out the rest of our days in your service. In the name of your holy Son, Jesus, I pray. Amen. That was Kevin Burns. You want to close us out, bro?
I think that does it better than I can.
All right. Thank you, man. Thanks
Thank
for the
you.
book. Thanks for your work. Y'all read the book, but also write the governor and let's continue the holy work of
Amen.
abolishing the death penalty and proclaiming the mercy and the goodness of God. And part of that gospel is no one is beyond redemption.
That's right.
All right. Thank you, my brother. Thanks, y'all, for joining.
All right. Thank you.
Cool. All right, buddy. Thanks, man.
All right. Tell your wife I said hey and tell her I still